the way that we got together for the CanAm, it makes an interesting story. I was invited to drive a car called the Beat Serini at LeMans. 10 months into my career, I'm at LeMans, the youngest American ever to race there. But when we got back to Autodynamics, the Beat Serini people got in touch with us and said, would we like to run their car in the CanAm? It wouldn't cost us a dime. So Ray and I suddenly started thinking CanAm. We weren't thinking that way at all until this offer came by. And the next step was finding out what sort of a deal they had in mind. And that was all set by the insurance they wanted us to have on the car. And the insurance was like 10 grand. And Ray said, we could enter the CanAm with a real CanAm car for that money. I'll never forget sitting there in the office and saying, well, let's do it. Let's get a car and run the CanAm. Why not? And so why not was the entry into the whole thing. And Ray was thinking big, which he was often able to do. There was so many ifs, ands, or buts in that business. And Ray was able to look through them and make sense of them. And we made sense of the CanAm situation by calling a guy in Texas that we'd heard of, who had a McLaren, that he wasn't going to race. And so we bought it for the same amount of money that we would have put it into the insurance in the Beat Serini. We were suddenly in the best possible situation. But we had to select an engine. And so we looked into the engine business, and there really was two choices. One was the Chevrolet, and the other was the Ford 289. Two choices. It was a McLaren or a Lola. And Ray felt that the Lola had a monocoque body that would be hard to repair. We selected the McLaren. And then we also selected the most conservative of the engine choices, the Ford 289, which had won Le Mans the year before. And it was a wonderful engine, but it didn't have the horsepower that Chevrolet had. So in hindsight, we made our choices based on my not being very good at the wheel. Very conservative, a car that could easily be repaired, and an engine that didn't blow up easily. So we had the slowest of the two combinations, but it worked great. It was when we got to the end of the season and we're trying to get into the points, which we hadn't, and we got an engine that was a bummer. And so that ended our CanAm hopes for that year. I saw what the CanAm was all about, and we decided that we would be able to build a car. Why not? Said Ray, basically. And he started designing a car. And it was a good-looking car right from the beginning. It had a particular feature, which was the non-independent suspension. And this feature was radical for the time. But Ray felt that we had I'm sorry, I have this hesitation in the voice. Comes up from time to time.
Not a problem.
Well, good. And I'm afraid that I'm tipped over here in the seat. That's not a problem either, I hope. It allows for a view of my paintings in the background. It's not what I had in mind, but there they are. Anyway, back to the CanAm. Ray designed a beautiful car, and it had this feature of non-independent suspension. The idea behind it was the tires were getting wider all the time, and therefore the surface of the turns was better experienced through a wider tire. And that was terrific for us because the car had incredible potential right away. And as the time went on and things happened, it wasn't a success in the terms of doing winning things, but there were flashes of brilliance with it. We had Elkhart Lake, for example, which had that fast turn 9, I think it was. And we were several tenths of a second faster than the McLarens through that one turn. Unfortunately, we weren't able to carry it through the whole lap, but that was a hint that there was something there that was going to be pretty good for us when we could get everything straightened out. And it was up to a point. And I'm talking too much here. But one thing led to another. And Ray was, right on top of it. But we didn't have enough money. I was financing the thing, and steps we should have taken in terms of testing and so forth. We really only had one test day in the whole program, and that was the crash at Lime when the front suspension failed, the Rose joint, and the car went into the woods with me in it, and I came to. We don't know. Nobody was there. It was a test day. There was nobody on the turns, and so I came to upside down, jammed in the wreckage of the car, and my feet were so tangled up in it, I thought I couldn't get loose. And in those days, fire was a big feature of life in the fast lane, and I had almost a full tank, and I could hear the fuel pumps ticking, and so I flipped this one switch or two fuel pumps. And I flipped one. I didn't know which was up or down because of the disorientation. So I flicked one way and the other way, hoping that there'll be only half an explosion. But it was neat to survive that, and as time has gone on, I realized how miraculous it was that I did survive it, because at any point things going wrong would have been fatal, and the chassis held up, and I was able to get my feet untangled on the pedals and crawl out underneath the tank. I was on my back going out of the tank, which shifted a little bit onto my chest. I thought, here it is, I'm going to be trapped upside down in the car. And it didn't shift again, it stayed free. And I got out and remember the first 3 or 4 steps away, realizing it's going to work, and I'm going to get away with this. And I wandered around in the woods for a while, in shock, obviously. Came back to the pits by a ride offered to me by a guy that had a Lotus 7. And I was standing by the edge of the track by then, and everybody was sort of wondering where the hell I'd gone, because there's no way to leave Lime Rock, the track. And so people were, Ray should pick the story up, because I don't know what was happening there, but the guy with the Lotus offered me a ride back to the pits, which naturally I accepted. And he said, you ought to drive my car for a few laps, get the feeling back. And so I didn't remember he had a tachometer. There was a little thing about, let's see, here we go, about this wide, about as wide as my finger. And I broke the track record for that class on my second lap. So that was the sort of standard we had at the time, which was something to be very proud of. And we had a second car under construction, and the 2 weeks between the Mossport race and the Laguna Seca. And Ray's organization was so fabulous that that second car was built in time and flown out to Laguna and set a lap record that still holds. McLaren tied me later in the race, but I set the time first. And it was really quite an achievement to have that car built and get going with it. I remember being so angry that the warm-up lap, I don't know, something like a loose spark plug. It was easily fixed. But I went out on the track behind the pack. They were halfway around the lap. So I had a clear track. And we set this lap record. And I was so mad and frustrated, and it came through in the driving. And that was the high point, really, for our efforts. And I mean, that record held up for ages. This was really something. Ray, you were at your best, I think, getting that car, second car, ready to go, because it was a huge project and very few days to do it. But he had the manpower in Autodynamics and the good, really good people. John Harkness among them, I think. So anyway, that wraps up the good part of it.
Is the car that we have in the museum the car that you went upside down in, or is it the second car?
It's the second car.
Okay. What happened to the one that you got upside down, Sam? What was what happened to that car?
Idea. I went home, and during the week that Ray was getting the second car ready, and I think quite a few parts were scrounged off of the wreck, and I never saw the wreck, which is interesting because I can't picture how the car wound up upside down, pointed backwards, and with everything haywire aboard it, except for the chassis. And Ray had designed a chassis which was like a big log, very, very strong, and it held up all through the crash. And I absolutely believe now in hindsight that it was the chassis that saved my life, because if that McLaren had gone through the same stresses, I don't think it would have held up. And so that was and it was a beautiful looking thing too, tapering to the front, wide at where the driver's seat was, and tapering to the front. A very, very handsome thing. The non-independent suspension was one of the things that, if we had had a chance to build another car, would have come into play, I think. It needed testing. And I had run out of money of the kind of the scale that you need to build a CanAm car. We began to realize that Jim Hall was going to beat us no matter what, because he just had the resources. And so the idea of being the fastest American went down the tubes with Jim's brilliant car. And he had an automatic transmission, so he only had to use one pedal. Of the two, they didn't have to operate the clutch. And he had a lot of other things going for him too. How did we get on to Jim Hall? This should be more about Ray.
Well, but the fact of the matter was, I consider that you gave me a real opportunity to do some of these things. Without you, I would not have ever had that chance at all.
Well, I don't know if that's the case. I think you were pretty good at generating action around your projects.
Well, that sounds good anyway.
Well, it was meant to. I thought, what the hell, the guy...
Sam, this is John Harkness. I'm going to interrupt for a minute. When you had that crash, later, some people went up and the tree that you hit on was full of rivets that came out of the car. I don't know, about 8 or 9 feet up the tree. And it was pretty easy to find the path through the woods and the tree that you hit. I don't know whether you're aware of that.
No, that's your right. Yeah, it was a bit of luck. It was very bad luck that the suspension failed, and yet very good luck from there on. It was really quite something to survive an accident of that magnitude and not even be hurt. My knees would cut a little bit, but that was it. And that was self-inflicted. As I kept trying to get my feet out from the pedals. They were wrapped around the pedals somehow. I don't remember how. But I was terrified of the fire. It wasn't until I was actually clear of the car that I knew I could get away with it. And then the autumn colors in the woods around me, was really something I'll never forget them. That and the sight of the fenders up again, it intense cerulean blue sky as the crash was in its first stage when it hit the embankment on the outside of the uphill. And it's funny, you look back over your career, and it's written a book about my career, basically, and realize how many times things turned out well versus things not turning out well. And
But while we're on the D7, I have one question for Sam about the suspension. I read and heard that it was terrific on the smooth tracks, but it was so violent on the bumpy tracks, it was really a handful.
you heard right.
Now, the thing I'm going to ask you is there was a legend, or is a legend that I heard about. Bridgehampton was so bumpy that after you ran the car there, before the feature race, you actually loosened the steering wheel nuts and bolts so the kickback wouldn't break your wrists. Is that a true legend?
That is true.
Thank you very much. You're still my hero. Now you're a legend.
It was a practice for Sebring the next year when I was driving for Ferrari, and the flange, I don't know what the technical term is here, but the back of the steering assembly was loose, and so I'm driving around Sebring, which is not the easiest track in the world, with the steering wheel that is flopping around, and I had to keep a hand on it hard lest it pop out. There was something else wrong with the car too, which I can't remember at the moment, but it was a pretty tough race. And the clutch was gone, so I was shifting without the clutch. And sometimes you just get into these situations which are almost laughable in hindsight, but at the time you've got to figure out what the hell to do about it.
These things were fixed when I turned the car over to Ronnie Bucknam, and he was at the wheel when the left rear tire went flat. He was a few hundred yards away from the pit entrance, and for reasons no one will understand, he kept going past it. Halfway around that lap, the flailing tire tore out the oil tank, and the engine seized up, and Ronnie spun to a stop. There is somewhere a shot of Mr. Canetti looking at his damaged car, and what thoughts he may have had have gone unrecorded. I thought it was the end of Ronnie with Nart, but no, he surfaced as my co-driver at LeMans, and in my view, totally redeemed himself with a brilliant drive in the heavy rain that was the trademark of that year's LeMans. Ronnie was a professional surveyor and all-around good guy. He died much too early, and I miss him.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm very lucky with Ferrari, because their cars in the years that I ran, 69 through 73, I think, they were very, very stout cars. And they were unfortunately just a little bit slower than the Porsche 917. And for Le Mans, which was our main feature in those days, the Porsche long tail was incredibly fast. And I set a record of sorts for top speed, because they had a category then, 248.
Wow.
And it happened that I was going down, I just started down the straight that goes on, and along came the long tail, and it edged past me, and I tucked in behind, and he set the lap record on that lap, and I came in second, so to speak. But it was still a thrill to drive that fast. And people asked me what was it like, and the answer was, it was fast. And over 150, it's all over anyway. So it was academic that it was that bit fast. Ferraris were very good cars to drive. And speaking of models, I have models of the car I finished fourth and set the lap record with, temporarily. 512 Ham Ferrari, which was a 72 car, and it was the best car I ever drove. Not great, not notwithstanding. It was really a piece of work. Beautiful car, great in every respect.